That's Russia, or to be correct, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Deep in its mountains lie thick, rich veins of gold and silver. Below ground lie enormous deposits of copper, tin, manganese and nickel, chromium and radium, sulfur and magnesium. Russia is rich in raw materials. Her forests cover millions upon millions of acres. 1/4 of all the lumber reserve in the world belongs to Russia. And as for fuel, there's coal, ton upon ton. And more important, there's also oil. 213 million barrels a year of it. Black gold flowing from the earth that contains 55% of the world's oil. What else? Iron? Russia has better than 10 billion tons. That can make a lot of steel before it's done. Yes, Russia is rich. Russia. Size, the largest country in the world. Raw materials, unlimited. Manpower, 193 million. These are the three reasons why every conqueror in history has wanted Russia. And these are the reasons why the modern would-be conqueror wrote,
"When we speak of new territory, we must think of Russia. Destiny itself points the way there."
Yes, as we have seen, Germany's spirit of aggression was handed down from generation to generation. And now, in Hitler's Germany, the dream was world conquest. To such a dream, there could be only one answer. When the blow came, it was from 5 different directions, and from the north, 1 extra, just for luck. That was the big day. As dawn broke, nearly 200 Axis divisions, more than 2 million men, plunged into a front 2,000 miles long, reaching from the White Sea to the Black. Their aim, the annihilation of the Red Army in a decisive battle on the frontier. The offensive started along the whole length of the front, but was concentrated on 3 main objectives: Leningrad, Moscow, and Kiev, the capital of the Ukraine. In the first 30 days, von Lieb's forces drove to within 125 miles of Leningrad, while the Finns under Mannerheim, supported by the Germans, began a drive from the north to encircle the city. In the center, von Bock's army plunged 480 miles into Soviet territory. One Russian city after the other was overrun by the invaders. And on July 17th, they captured the first main objective, Smolensk, regarded as the key to Moscow. Simultaneously, in the south, von Rundstedt's forces cut deep into the Ukraine. This was blitzkrieg at its best. The world gave Russia another 6 weeks, and the Germans issued a communique.
The issue in the east has already been settled. Smolensk is the last halt on the road to Moscow.
But then a strange thing happened. For the first time since the mighty German army started its career of blitz, smashing into submission one European country after the other, that same German army came up against a country that did not submit. Despite the fact that Hitler's army swept deeper and deeper into the Soviet Union, and by October the 15th stood practically within the shadows of the Kremlin, despite the fact that the Soviet government and all foreign missions were forced to move to Kuibyshev, 700 miles to the east, despite Hitler's triumphant pronouncement, I can say that this enemy is already broken and will never rise again. Despite the fact that by December, 500,000 square miles of Russian territory, an area equal to the entire Middle Western United States, had fallen to the invaders, Yes, despite Russia's loss of her best agricultural areas, her most thoroughly developed industrial plants, millions of her people, thousands of her tanks and her planes, despite everything, those 6 weeks had lengthened into nearly 6 months, and the dread Nazi Blitz had spluttered, stumbled, and finally died. What had happened here? Nothing that the enemy could use was left behind. Not a yard of wire or a pound of iron. Not an acre of wheat or a head of cattle. And the old men stood watch over the fields, ready to give the word to burn at the first sight of the enemy. Scorched earth. What can't be withdrawn must be destroyed. That meant the factories, the plants, the oil depots. Flames claimed them all. The giant dam at MEHRussia, into which had been poured not only steel and concrete, but 5 long years of Russian toil and Russian sweat to yield the miracle of electricity to the farms and people of the Ukraine. Now, rather than let the power it generated fall to the enemy, they destroyed it. Scorched earth, the land they had lived on and worked on, their forests, their fields, their farms. They surrendered them to the flames, but not to the invaders. That was the scorched earth. Their old ally, the Russian winter, had carpeted the Russian land. The staff of the Red Army knew that they still faced the most powerful enemy in history, and that that enemy would attack again. But when this attack came, the whole German strength was to be concentrated on one objective: the Caucasus and oil. The Caucasus Mountains represent one of the toughest military obstacles in the world. Towering peaks rising to heights of as much as 18,000 feet, with only one practical highway traversing them. And Baku, the biggest oil field, is on the other side. To reach Baku, the only feasible military route was along the coast to the Caspian Sea. But the map shows what a dangerously extended supply line this would entail. To make the operation a success for the Germans, the first necessity was control of the northern hub of the rail lines of the area and a new base of operations. That hub was a Volga River port we have come to know well, Stalingrad, named for Russia's present leader. The pride of this generation of Russians, for it was their city, built in their time. With the capture of Stalingrad, the Nazis would have a base from which to launch a flanking attack on Moscow. With one master stroke, the Russian armies to the south would be cut off from help. And in the north, Russian factories, Russian farms, and Russian armies would be practically cut off from Caucasus oil, and also from American and British supplies, which were shipped to Russia through Iran and Iraq. German control of the entrance to the Volga and its 2 main ports, Astrakhan and Stalingrad, would be a crippling blow for Russia. This city had become the focal point of the whole campaign. Regardless of the cost, Stalingrad must be captured. Those were the German orders. Fire! Fire! German guns, German bombs shattered the city into pieces. By By September 20th, the Germans, after 30 days of grueling and ceaseless fighting, battled their way into the city's outskirts. By the end of the month, their drive had carried them through the whole northwest section of the city and into occupation of part of the center, including the railroad station. On the last day of September, Hitler announced that the fall of the city was only a matter of a few days. Once more, the world was afraid a Russian campaign was lost. But once more, the Germans were to stand on the very threshold of victory and still fail. And now they were to meet a fire of fury such as they had never known. Gone before, the battles waged in the streets of Kiev, Rostov, Odessa, Sevastopol, these were all preludes to what happened in Stalingrad. Every inch of the city was a strategic point to be defended as such. By the end of October, snow covered Stalingrad. From the air, the Germans tried to force the surrender of the Russian-held part of the city. At the same time, the battle of the streets continued. November dawned, the Russians were no longer defending their city inch by inch. Inch by inch, they were regaining it.